It is Beyond the Steps Day. It is Friday at 3:30 on the East Coast and at the perfect time wherever you are sitting. So we are here today with a wonderful guest. Excuse me, Kelsey Nelson. As soon as I get my English together, Kelsey Nelson is here with us today to talk about how we can hold students accountable in a healthy way. I am Melissa McDaniel Grisham, founder of Turning Point Dance Creations, here with my amazing co-host, Bree Zabrowski from Apollo Performance. And we are honored, privileged, happy, joyful, excited to bring Beyond the Steps to you every single Friday at 3:30 Eastern on YouTube and on Facebook at TP Dance Creations. We talk about the hard topics, the fun topics, the great topics, the thought-provoking topics around racism, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance medicine and science, lifestyle, mindset, wellness, you name it, we talk about it. And we are happy to be back for a season 4 of this show and to have Kelsey Nelson back with us for the second time as a guest on Beyond the Steps. Like I said, we are talking about accountability today. It seems to be a buzzword these days. Hold accountable, you're accountable, I'm accountable, we're accountable. We're going to talk about what that actually means and how we can do it in a healthy way. If this is an episode that you think someone else would be interested in, tag them, invite them, send them the link. They can watch live right now. If they can't watch right now, they can go back on YouTube or on Facebook at TP Dance Creations or at Apollo Performance and watch the full episode. So let's jump into it. Bree, you want to tell us a little bit about Kelsey?
Yeah, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Steps. We're so pumped to have Kelsey back with us. She has over 25 years of dance experience, ranging from major motion pictures to teaching students across North America, judging for prestigious dance competitions, creating her own conditioning program for dancers. She's worked with everybody under the sun. She's toured on cruise ships and around the country. She's amazing. I wish I would have had her as my educator growing up. So anybody is lucky to have her now, and we're so pumped to have her. But right now, you can find her with it's the Bridge Training Program and Thrive Dance Experience, which is a convention. So check her out if you're on any of those stops. Kelsey, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and can't wait for this very I think important conversation that we're about ready to have.
Yeah, it is. Melissa said this word is like thrown around. It's a buzzword for sure.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to dive in. But you've been making some big changes in your career since the last time we had you on. You've expanded your work, right? So tell us about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I have made the transition into stepping into fully doing freelance and guest teaching and choreography.
Yeah.
And so that has been a big change that I've made going into this 2023-2024 season. And it's definitely provided some growth for sure. But it's also provided me a lot of more time to connect with my family and be there for my son, which is also super important to me. So I'm getting kind of the best of both worlds, and I think I've kind of found my path and where I want to be moving forward. So I'm
I
very
love it.
excited about that and all that the future holds.
Congratulations. I know that's a huge step. Like I
Yeah.
remember when I made that step to like going all in on my own business, going in on Apollo and left my job, like the all the stability and the comfort in that space. Like I always say, like if you wake up the next day, you can miss it, but if you wake up the next day and you don't have regrets, like it was the right decision. And I feel that like emanating from you. I was going to ask you how you feel, but I don't even need to ask.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
big jump.
it's been it's been a lot of like self-discovery and growth,
Yeah.
but it also has opened my eyes to the community that
Yeah.
I have, and I think that we all have, that we don't necessarily realize is existing out there for us. So that's been like really awesome to make those connections and develop those relationships with studio owners, teachers, students, just anybody in the industry that maybe I didn't even know was kind of in my corner. It's so
Yeah.
interesting, the people that show up when you don't expect it,
Yeah.
or you don't even think those are the ones that are going to be there. So it's just been it's been really reassuring and has definitely felt really good over the past few months as I've
Congratulations. So
transitioned.
happy for you. It could not be more deserved. Like truly, we are cheering. We've always
Yeah.
been cheering you on. Like you are just somebody whose name is always, I've never heard one negative thing,
Right.
in terms of like, you're just such an incredibly passionate, knowledgeable educator. And we just need more of you. So I'm so happy it's working out. Congrats.
Well, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to tell you how to get in touch with Kelsey. But let me tell you now, I've been, hey, are you close to Charlotte? Are you close to Charlotte? So I'm booked. So get in.
Start now for 2025.
You better get on it. Yeah. Okay.
Booking in 2025, Kelsey Nelson.
So I'm gonna get right into the meat of things. We like to start at the baseline here, but I don't even know if we're starting at the baseline. I think we're gonna be undoing some things with this question. So accountability, like I said a little bit earlier, is a used just they insert it for any word anytime they decide that they want to either say something really great or maybe say something not so wonderful. They go, I'm going to hold you accountable. So I think sometimes the word is used kind of wrong or a little bit too lightly. So what does accountability, Kelsey, mean to you? And how do you explain that to your students?
Yeah, so I had to do a lot of really like thinking about this to kind of like get into what do I think accountability is. And two words that really like stick out to me when I think about accountability are honesty and integrity. And those are two really big things that I think lead us down the path of accountability. And then that leads us to the third thing, which is ownership. And I think that when you as a student or a teacher or a parent or just a human being can start to be honest with yourself about where you're at or how you actually showed up in a situation or how you feel, right? Then you can start to have some integrity with how you respond to a situation or what you say or how you act. And that leads to the ownership part. And that's where that like self accountability really starts to happen. And then other people no longer have to hold you accountable because you're already doing that work for yourself. And so then accountability becomes very personal and it's not something that somebody else has to do for you. So I think that those
that
are
was a textbook answer. I love that. Like, let's put that in the dictionary. Love it.
So that's kind of what accountability is to me.
The ownership piece, I think, is what is, and we're probably going to talk about this a little bit more as we get into some of our other questions. But that ownership piece, I think, is often missing when people think about accountability. Like you can't hold someone accountable for something they don't want to do, they haven't committed to doing. They have no idea they're supposed to be doing. Like I can't hold you accountable for that unless you take ownership of what that thing is. But go off on a tangent. I'm gonna start here first though. Let's talk about how you hold yourself accountable as a teacher and how important it is. Do you think it's important to model that accountability for yourself and model that behavior that you want to see?
Absolutely. I think especially in a dance studio environment or on a competition team or even in any business that might be ran or relationships as that, we as leaders are setting the tone and setting the example. So if we are not doing what we're asking of others, well, then they're not going to have respect for that thing that we're asking for. And they're not going to take it seriously. So I am huge on accountability for myself. And one of the biggest ways to kind of show that and share that with my students or my coworkers or anywhere that I'm at is being having clear and open communication. So if I didn't do something that I said I was going to do, if I'm going to be late, if I fell short on the expectation, I openly and honestly communicate that with whoever I need to share that with. So that way they can see and hear me as the leader acknowledging my shortcomings or my mistake, and then watching me take that ownership, right? And making those changes or taking those actions to fix that thing. That is where the like accountability piece I think is really important as leaders, and also be willing to take the consequence or take the feedback that comes with whatever I didn't do or fell short on, and not fighting that. So being really open to that feedback and those consequences, and doing it humbly and not fighting that, I think is really important as leaders. So I think that communication, that openness, and then we're modeling the behavior. So we can't ask somebody to do something we're not going to do.
Exactly. And I think that what you just said was very important, that I think I was gonna say students, but I don't know, it might be more parents than students, somehow believe that taking accountability absolves you of consequence. And that's not necessarily the case. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's parents that feel that way more than students. They're, just because you're accountable, you say, hey, I need to miss this rehearsal before competition, which I know is against the rules, doesn't mean that we still let you perform when the rule is that you don't perform.
Correct.
When you miss the rehearsal before competition. And it is so common for a parent to go, well, she told you. Well, yeah, thank you.
Well, I think there's two things here that are really difficult. The first one being, this is a really challenging, we're making it sound very straightforward and black and white and easy, but the reality is, again, controversial, but there's a lot of ego in this business, right? And there's a lot of people that have trouble with clear, consistent communication. And so this concept, although it sounds simple, is not as easily adapted as one would think, which is why we're having this conversation today. There's quite a few people, and people I know personally, that have a hard time admitting they're wrong in front of their students because they're not supposed to be wrong, right? They're the teacher, they're the authority figure, they're the this, they're the that. And I think that misconception has to be thrown in the trash can, quite honestly.
Yes, absolutely.
But do you agree that's probably hard for a lot of people in this business?
Yes. I think accountability comes with a humbleness, and it comes with a self-awareness that is lacking, I think, in general, in a lot of us. And you're right. I think it does start a lot with parents, which parents are the leaders of their household. So the kids are then following that suit and then bringing that into the class. So I think that that ego and that like not wanting to be wrong or show that you're wrong or that you made a mistake is something that we think we're doing to help our students, but in the end it's actually hurting them or lessening the like educational process. I believe in the classroom, like my job is to create a safe space for kids to fail on a daily basis so that they can learn to then get better. I was teaching a student last night and I told them that very thing. I taught them a combination and they bombed it. And I said, that's my favorite part, watching you guys struggle. And they were like, oh. Said, no, because that's I'm creating a space for you to learn, right? And so if we can never admit a mistake or admit that we failed at something, well, then we're never going to be able to learn from that and take those lessons and then be better the next time. And at the end of the day, that's kind of like accountability, right? We want to hold ourselves to our highest standard. And the only way we can do that is by acknowledging where we aren't at our best. So that way we can learn how to be there.
Well, and I think too, like as parents and educators, the second challenge that we face is calling out what Melissa said. There are still consequences when you're accountable to something. But I think the problem is when people follow the rules and they become accountable, but the people that don't follow the rules and kind of fly under the radar and just do and don't ask and do and kind of get away with it, for lack of a better term. I think the onus is on the directors and the educators and the parents, for that matter, to make sure that they're consistent. And that's the word that you said earlier, is that consistent across the board, and that there's heavier consequences for those people that aren't accountable versus when you are accountable. Because I've had people come to me as a director in the past, follow the rules, and have to deal with the consequences that are really frustrated because so-and-so, which I missed as a director, so-and-so did X, Y, and Z, and there was no consequences. Well, why am I being penalized for telling the truth, following the rules, those types of things? So calling out that it's really important, to go back to that consistency conversation that you were having earlier.
Yeah. And I think too, and this is something that I've learned with age, and I can honestly say I'm enjoying getting older, which sounds
Sure.
weird, but
Yeah.
that wisdom that comes with it, um, being able to remove the emotion
Yep.
behind the consequence and
So clutch.
behind the conversation of holding someone accountable. It's not an emotional experience, it's a factual thing. And I
Yeah.
think at times that might sound a little bit cold, but if there can be that clear boundary, well, then it's not personal. You're talking about the actions and the choices somebody made. It wasn't about that person as a human being. And I
Yeah.
think like differentiating those two things, you know, there was a time where a bunch of younger kids were really loud in the lobby at a studio I was teaching at, and I went out there and I was like, "Hey, we got to be quiet." And like that was the end of it, and they all like, you know, did that thing, and then they came in the classroom and I said, "I want you to know I'm not mad at you as human beings. I'm not upset with you. It was the choice you were making to be really loud in the lobby, and that's unacceptable. So we've got to talk about that choice, not about you as a person. You've
Right.
got
Got
to
it.
make better choices."
I love
And
that.
so getting that clear, and whether that's a conversation with a parent or a kid or a coworker or whoever that is, kind of taking that emotion out and just talking about the action and the choice, I think makes it a little bit easier to start holding people accountable and holding yourself accountable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that. Obviously, clear expectations and goals. We're talking about consistency. That's key, right? But like, how young is too young to understand this concept of accountability? Like, can you teach a 5-year-old dancer, about accountability, or do they understand the concept? Or are we just starting to model the behavior and introduce, those themes and patterns into the way that we're talking to them and frankly, modeling to them?
I think it can be taught at a young age. I think as they get older, you can get more explicit with what accountability is. I think at a young age, like a perfect example is giving them like a homework assignment. Like, okay, everybody bring in a prop you want to dance with. And
Mhm.
then if somebody doesn't bring it in, okay, well, you didn't bring in the prop and we all had to have one. And so if you didn't bring this, like that's impacting the experience of the class because now you can't participate.
Mhm.
And is that fair to you? Is that fair to the class? And getting them to understand that they had a responsibility and they didn't follow through on it. So they have to sit out of that portion of class, let's say, using
Mhm.
that as an example. Well, they're not going to like that, but they're learning, okay, I didn't do what was asked of me. So next time I've got to make sure I do that thing so I get to do the fun part of class. So getting them to understand how that impacts their experience, impacts the class, is going to help them start to understand responsibility and then accountability, and then it leads on from there. So
So
just
what do you
taking
say to
any,
the yeah, what do you say to the parents that inevitably are going to come back to you and go,
Oh
"It's
my gosh,
not their fault. I
you
forgot. Don't put you
ruined
left
my
my kid out
child's
of
experience.
Yeah, you left my kid out." What do you say?
well, so I had kind of the same experience actually happen last year. We were making Christmas ornaments and I handed out one to every kid and they were supposed to bring them back. And a kid didn't bring it back on the day that we were supposed to pass them out. And I let the parents know, let the kids know, reminded them multiple times. So when they did the ornament exchange, one kid was absent, so lucky for them. And then one kid didn't bring hers. So I let her sit and watch and participate, but she didn't get to take home an ornament because she didn't bring one. And the mom reached out to me and wanted to have a phone call. And I explained, I said, I totally understand that your daughter felt left out because she didn't get to bring an ornament. I let her participate in the whole class. And it wouldn't be fair to have her take an ornament home and another kid not get to take one home when they brought their ornament.
Right.
And explaining the bigger picture of what I was trying to teach, and that the accountability at that age also relates to the parents, and everybody has to be involved and participating and enrolled in what's happening in their child's class so that their kid doesn't have to go through that experience, and learn that because they weren't a part of their child's learning experience.
Love
Yeah.
So
that.
So
it
again, it's
happened to,
that consistency and
yes,
upholding, you communicated
yes,
beforehand, this is the expectation, this is the consequence, didn't happen, you're consistent and you stand firm, right?
yep,
And
and
explain
and
it. We
then
don't have to agree, but you have to respect the
yes. And I was like, I love your kid, but we also have 8 other kids in the class. So I can't jeopardize their experience just for your child, because that also wouldn't be fair.
Mhm.
And I pulled her daughter aside the next class, and I told her, I said, I love you very much. And, you didn't get an ornament, not because I don't care about you, but because you didn't bring one. And it had nothing to do with you as a person. I think you're lovely and I love teaching you. It had to do with the fact that you didn't bring an ornament. And explaining that to her and getting her to really understand that, she was totally okay. And the girl that was sick brought in her ornament, and they were able to trade it out and made everything work. So everything kind of like fell into place how it should. But yeah, just taking those chances to again have that communication, explain, and really like stand firm in your boundary and the expectation, and not waver from that.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you're just joining, this is Beyond the Steps. This is a show that we talk about all issues that affect performance athletes, from racism to gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance medicine and science, and more. I'm Bree Zabrowski, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance. We're here with my fabulous friend and co-host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham of Turning Point Dance Creations. We are talking with the incomparable Kelsey Nelson today about how we hold students accountable in a healthy way. This is a great conversation. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all the things, because we want to get this information out to our community, because we want to leave it better than we found it. So, Kelsey, what are some obstacles that to change that teachers might face as they attempt to start holding their students accountable? What are those barriers that you want to caution everybody now as they start this journey?
Well, I mean, the first thing is going to be resistance, because it is change, right? So,
Yeah.
I didn't get in trouble before. Well, I don't want to use the trouble, but I didn't have a consequence before. This didn't happen last time that I did this. It was so on and so
Right.
forth. So that like fight of like, well, this isn't how we've done it. So I think that that's the biggest thing. So clearly communicating, changes are going to be made. This is why, this is what they're going to be. And clearly communicate that with the dancers, the parents, post it on your team thread, on the band app, whatever it is that you need to do, so that they have that information, so you can always go back and reference it. I think having that like support, that reference, is always going to be really helpful. So that way you can circle back and say, this is what we talked about. You agreed to this. And now we're actually taking action. And I think another thing is people that probably don't align with the culture that you're creating, or the expectations, or so on and so forth, are going to really put up a fight. And the fear of losing clientele, or losing students because you're holding them accountable. And I totally understand it's a business, and dance studios, we're there to share dance. It's also a business, and we're there to make money, and clientele is very important. And if they're not going to be happy because you're trying to better their child or better their experience, well, then it might not be the right place for them in the first place. And being okay with that, you want people that are going to be in complete alignment with what you're doing and how you're operating. And those that are going to fight it are going to continue to fight it. So, not being afraid to let them go, and have clientele that aligns with your mission, because they'll come. Because parents and students that see the type of business that you're running and the type of team that you have, they're going to gravitate towards that. So you're going to have dancers and parents that align. So I think that that's the biggest thing, is just that first like resistance, and then being afraid of losing clientele and students because you're holding people accountable.
Yeah, and I will tack on to that. If you're on this journey to sort of model accountability, A, and B, implement it in your organization, I would say don't start that process until you are all in. Like, you can't, this is not something you can just dip a toe in the water, because people
No.
sense when it's not authentic. So if you, all the things Kelsey just said, until you're willing to go, yes, I will lose people over this, I'm going to die on this hill, and that's it. Like, you have to be ready for that and go, I am okay with this. And if you're not, this is not a dip your toe in and try it out sort of situation, because you get one shot to show people this is a policy change. This is serious. I am serious about this. And if you want people to take you seriously, you have to follow through, and that follow through is clutch. So
yes. Yeah, because people are going to challenge you. People are going to push you. People are going to see, just like a toddler test a parent, how much can they get away with? That's going to happen, and you can't back down, because if you get challenged and the first time that you back away from it, or you don't follow through on what you said you're going to do, well, then that's going to be evident for everybody. Just like if you do follow through on what you say you're going to do. So you're setting that example, like we talked about earlier. As the leader, we are the example. So it's very important, like you said, to like be all in when it comes to accountability.
Yeah, and I will say it's easier to do when you're looking at it as it's for the good of the whole. Like if you take almost the emotion out of it, and the God, I really don't want to have this confrontation, and all of those things. You don't look at it that way. You look at it, this is something that has to be done for the to accomplish the goals, the bigger picture goals that I have for this group or this organization. It has to be this way. If you look at it like that, it's a lot easier sometimes to be able to take that step forward and just do what has to be done. Just my experience anyway. But Kelsey, let's talk about the type of things that we should be appropriately holding students accountable for. Should it be only things that are in their control, like work ethic, attitude, versus scores and awards and things like that? Shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, I think accountability, I've talked to lots of different people about that ownership piece, and about we can only control what we can control. And so if we're trying to hold people accountable to things that are out of their control, they're going to not feel connected to that, number one, and they're going to feel like they can't actually take ownership of it, right? Because like a score competition, that's not up to them, but how hard they work in the classroom, how much rehearsal they put in, how they take their notes, right? That kind of stuff they have control over. So it's how they're showing up and how they're being in that space that we can hold dancers and students accountable for. But we can't necessarily hold them for accountable things outside of the studio. So things that I am like a big stickler on. So showing up on time, be there on time. And I know that a lot of kids don't drive and their parents drive. So that's like a loose conversation that you have with the kid. That's something that you seriously address with a parent. And that's things like, okay, your parent's coming home from work to pick you up and you have to be waiting for them. Are you on your porch ready to go? Do you have your bag? Are you dressed? Is your hair done? You have your snack, your water. You're ready. You've done everything you can do so you can hop in that car and make it to the dance studio, right? So like having them understand what their piece of that puzzle is, having appropriate attire and shoes and their hair done, all of those like classroom rules, that's something that's very clear. And in the expectations, we can hold them accountable to that, right? Effort. Them understanding what effort looks like and when they're not giving everything, and being able to point that out in a way that's going to help them push themselves more rather than break down and feel like they're negatively impacting the group, right? So those kinds of conversations are more of a private thing that you would do separate. Anytime that I'm really holding somebody accountable with a very serious consequence, that's not something I ever do in a public setting, right? So that's a conversation that I'm going to have privately with the dancer and their parents, with just the parents, depending on what that looks like. But things like body language, being on time, like having what they're supposed to have, that I'm going to point out in class, and then I'm going to have the conversation later so that they know I'm aware, the class knows I'm aware, and that like nobody's skirting by and not getting that equal treatment, right? So I think that those are kind of the things that we can definitely hold students accountable for. But when it comes to awards and placements and scholarships and college acceptance, that's not something that like we can hold them accountable for. We can hold them accountable for things they can control.
Right.
How do you deal with the people who have like that that thirst for blood, like the other parents and kids that are like, so and so did this and they need to get in trouble. You know, you do want to handle that privately, and it's so funny because it's like people want to see that you
They want to
did
see the
something,
right.
right? So like,
Mhm.
but it is absolutely appropriate to do it in private. But how do you deal with those people? Because it always
Well,
happens.
I mean, I would just ask them, do you want your business out in the air? So if you don't want your situation to be put out in public and for me to display that to everybody and share it with everyone, I'm not going to share this. Each situation is a case by case basis. The conversations and the everything that's impacting what happened is individualized to that specific person in that specific scenario. So each consequence is going to be dictated based off of that, right? And I'm not airing any of your business with anyone. I'm not going to air theirs.
Mm,
So that's kind of
Absolutely.
where I would have that conversation. Short
yeah.
and sweet.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that led and really pretty much answered my question about the right and the wrong way to hold a child accountable. And I think that, do you think, and this is going off on a tangent, but I think that this idea of public humiliation, um, I'm going to say something controversial that I grew up with. I'm 44, grew up with in the studio setting, because that was the
Yes.
thing. Like, I am going to, you're an example right now. And the
Well, and
public,
I have definitely, I'm not going to sit, I've definitely done it out of,
oh, yeah.
because that's
Oh,
the way that I was taught. And you definitely have to be conscious. I am doing this right now. And you don't even go in with the intent that you're doing it, but I've done it. I'm sure, you know, you guys have done it at some point in your career. It is not the way you want to go, but
Right.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Kelsey?
yeah, I think wanting to humiliate somebody is never
No.
a good idea. If and not that it should happen, and how people take a conversation might make them feel a certain way. But I think the intention should never be there, right?
Mhm.
I'm huge on like crossing of arms. So I'm like crazy about that. We'll
That's
do
a big
something very
one.
basic and
Yeah.
easy to talk about. So I'm crazy about like arm crossing. So when I'm teaching, whether I'm on a convention stage in front of hundreds of kids and I'm in the mini room and there's 80 parents sitting there, or I'm in a private lesson, or I'm in like a studio I teach at every single week, if I see a kid with their arms crossed, I'm going to call them out. And
Mhm.
it's like, it's not mean, it's not rude. I'm like, number 427, uncross your arms. And then I keep going on to like my teaching. Or I'll
Mhm.
look somebody in the eye and say, I need you to uncross your arms, or I'll walk up to them and physically just like move their arms down as I'm like moving through the classroom. So I'm acknowledging it, I'm pointing it out, but I'm not ridiculing them, right? Or like trying to make them feel bad
Mhm.
about it. So I think the intention behind the conversation, if you're purposely trying to make somebody feel bad about something, well, then that's the complete wrong approach. We want to bring awareness to something. So I think that that's like the biggest thing. Um, and like I'm crazy about non like physical consequences for things. So
Mhm.
like if somebody's late, I'm not going to make them do a 5 minute wall sit. I'm going to
Right.
make them empty the trashes. So that's where my
Mhm.
consequences are different
I like
than
that.
most.
Great idea.
So like if somebody walks in late and they didn't let me know they were going to be late, they'd walk in, and as they're putting their stuff down, I'd be like, make sure you let your mom know you're going to stay 5 minutes after to empty the trashes. That's
Right.
the end of the conversation.
Right.
So being like pointing that out, everybody hears that's happening. They see that I acknowledged it. The kid knows, right? But I'm not trying to make them feel bad about it.
So
Um,
I'm so curious, what are your thoughts on team accountability? So like if one
Mm.
person is late,
oh,
one person does this, one person does that, we live and die as a team, the whole team has
yes.
to do X. Like what are your
So
thoughts on that?
so if it's like a classroom setting, right? So like if somebody, I'm just going to use late because it's easy. If somebody's late to class, well, class is like a personal thing, right? So that accountability, that consequence, that's theirs personally. If somebody's late to warm up at competition, we are all standing in a circle, not warming up, waiting
For you.
until that person shows up. So that person knows, like, okay, they're all waiting for me as I walk up because I was not here on time and I
I
didn't
like it.
communicate that. So
I
I'm huge
like
on
it.
communication. If you text me and say, I'm in traffic and it's crazy and I'm going to be 5 minutes late, okay, that's forgivable, right? That's
Sure.
human, that's life. But if you're not going to tell me you're going to be late and you just think you can just show up whenever you want and my time is not valuable, nor is your team's time valuable, that you can even take the 30 seconds to communicate it, well, then we're all going to be waiting for you so that you see, okay, if you're this important that you're not going to communicate, you're going to be late, we're going to be waiting for you.
Mhm.
So making understanding those situations and those scenarios and competition performances, that's all rehearsals, that's all team. When
Mhm.
it's class, right, when it's convention class or anything like that, that's personal. So those consequences and that's going to look different, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's kind
absolutely.
of how I approach that. But yeah, I'm huge on communication. If you're going to communicate something, if you're going to walk up to me and be like, I know I was supposed to bring my costume and I forgot it, and I acknowledge that I forgot it. Um, and I got to the point with my regular students that they'd be like, I know I didn't bring my costume. I acknowledge I forgot it. I'll stay and clean the mirrors. I wouldn't even have to tell them there was a consequence. They already like knew, or they'd be like, what do you want me to do? So when it gets to that point that it's not even like an upsetting thing, then you know that you've developed a culture and a group of people that are like all aligned and on board. And so again, that accountability becomes personal and it's not something I even have to do anymore.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
like the goal in my mind.
I love that. I love the don't make it personal. If you're just now joining us, we are talking to Kelsey Nelson about how we can hold our students accountable in a healthy way. We have had some great aha moments out there, some light bulbs. Please go back and watch this episode from the beginning. You still have a little bit of show left, so you can watch this. Still invite some people, like, share, repost, subscribe, comment, engage, all of those things. And we love to hear what you have to say about this. If you do want to watch this episode from the beginning or recommend it to someone, i.e., your parents or your students or other teachers, you can go to YouTube or Facebook at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations and find the entire episode. So it sounds like you have found some great methods in order to do this, some great phrases. I've heard you say things in a way that I think, really gets the buy-in from students. But what advice would you give to a teacher who is in a situation where the parent or guardian is not upholding the accountability and not supporting your efforts? So you say, hey, you're 5 minutes late, you're gonna have to stay and take out the trash. And that parent's like, Susie, come on. They're in the door. They're like, no, you're not. What in the world do you do with that?
Well, I mean, that's a hard situation.
Mhm.
And that's a conversation that you have separately with the parents. And I think you ask them, why? Why do you feel like you can't support the culture, the mission, the vision in this space, in these four walls? What is it that you feel that you don't align with? And
Mhm.
I think getting them to start to communicate that and share why they have such a problem with it, you can then drive that conversation to help enroll them in what you're up to.
Mhm.
Or realize that there's no aligning that's possibly going to happen. And then that's a different conversation that you have regarding um, future relationships and if that student and that family is meant to be within your studio and within your team.
Mhm.
I think there's a rule. I worked at Lululemon for a long time and learned it there, so I don't know where it came from, but asking why 5 times.
I remember you saying.
And I don't know if I've mentioned it before when we've talked, but I think if you can ask the parent, well, why do you have an issue with this consequence? Okay, well, then they're going to tell you, well, then if you ask them again, why, and follow up with that. If you can go 5 times, you're going to start to get to the root of what their actual issue is, and then that's something that you can start addressing. And then that's where the conversation can kind of go from there. At the end of the day, I think a lot of times it has to do with they look bad as
Mhm.
parents and they don't like that feeling. And maybe their kid made them look bad, or maybe their choice impacted their kid and they don't like that, so they're embarrassed by that. So I think really digging into that conversation and acknowledging, like, we all make mistakes, we all have flub ups, we all, miss the email, like that happens. And this is what we need to do moving forward so that we can all be aligned, we don't have to do this again. I think is super important. So it starts with a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's time to move to homework.
Yes, let's do it, Melissa. So Kelsey, we do homework on this show.
Yes. I love it. I have my kids do homework all the time, so I'm game.
Oh, someone's I think my watch is talking to me, so ignore that. My my watch wants to join the conversation as well.
Right.
So Melissa, let's take it to homework.
So we give homework here. What is one action you want our listeners or viewers to take between now and next week's show, which is 7 days, to make progress in this area, Kelsey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is teachers and students, again, having a conversation. So if the teachers sit down their students and say, okay, we're going to start making an accountability list. Okay, so certain actions are going to have certain consequences, and consequences aren't necessarily bad. So sitting them down and saying, okay, if we're late, what do we think an acceptable consequence is? What can we all agree we think that we can all be aligned on this, and start to have conversations about if we don't have proper dance shoes, and if we're late, and if we have a bad attitude, and what do we think these consequences should be, and really enrolling the kids in that conversation so that way they feel like they're a part of it. So then when they don't have their dance shoes, you can say, okay, well, you have to miss out on freeze dance at the end because you didn't bring your shoes. And remember, we talked about it. That was going to be the consequence. Mm-hmm. So I think having teachers and students start to really have those conversations, understanding what a consequence is, and like, hey, we all showed up on time. We all had what we were supposed to have. So the consequence of that is that we all get candy at the end of class, right? So getting the kids to understand that consequence doesn't equal bad. Mm-hmm. And like getting them to really be a part of the whole thing, I think is going to help studios, parents, teachers, kids, all kind of get on the same page. And then that conversation is going to start to be easier. And then you're going to have it more or less, because you're not going to have people doing the things that we have to hold them accountable for. And I think that's going to help set you in the right direction for a good rest of the season and just the future.
Well, I think when you hear conversations like this too, I know I do this, like I hear something and I'm like, I'm going to do this. We're all going to be accountable, and I'm going to go back and we're all going to be accountable. I think it's really important to call out, like, don't just go back and go just
all in, like,
on the accountability.
People.
Like, yes. Maybe sit down and make a little list of like the things that are really like problematic in your studio or organization, and start there. And in terms of like creating a policy to address accountability, and don't go ham on the accountability, like straight out the gate.
Right. No, we gotta start small, and that's start with things that like are common and things that like we're all aware of, right? And like start there and then build. Policies and procedures take time to develop, right? Yeah. So they're not just going to appear and then we're all just going to jump on board. So making them small, making them attainable, being consistent, and then you can start to really start implementing bigger ideas and concepts to your overall team, to your parents, to your students, to your employees, your coworkers. So again, start small, have those conversations, brainstorm, think about it. What does your ideal classroom environment look like? What does your ideal business model look like? And start to kind of really dig into that and ask yourself why 5 times. And then you're going to start to get down to like the root of what you really want to focus on.
Well, a dance is such a great opportunity for this because there's such a clear like beginning and ending of the season. And so I don't know how you guys did this, but for me, like I always had the parent meeting at audition time and then the parent meeting at the beginning of the year, a staff meeting in there, at the beginning of the season. And then sometime in January or February, I would start already thinking about the schedule for summer and for next season. And that's when I would sit down with the staff and go, okay, what's working, what's not working. That's your time to really or was my time. Everybody does something a little different, but that was my time to really evaluate, okay, what policies do we need to put in place for next season? Because for me, introducing things mid-season when it hasn't been properly communicated already is really, really challenging. So I would always take that opportunity to go, okay, this is for 24, 25 season. What are we going to do differently? What are we going to implement? And that by the time we get to that parent meeting at auditions, everybody knows exactly what to expect. It's all laid out black and white and we can proceed from there. Right. So how did you do that? Like, how do you introduce changes all the time, or do you wait until that sort of new season changes over? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I would say for your overall studio, right? Just the studio as a whole, definitely the beginning of the season is going to be the right space to do that. If you have a competition team, you have kind of a second chance, I think.
Yeah.
Because going into competition season, you can have that parent meeting, right? This is the beginning of the season. This is before our first competition. This is kind of the expectations going into this season of the year. And that's where you can maybe implement a few, not 20, new expectations. And those expectations, you then can start practicing that follow through with a more focused group of individuals that then gives you that practice to start implementing it, maybe with our non-competitive kids or our 1 day a week students, where the parents and the kids aren't as regularly at the studio and don't have that all-in investment yet. And those are the ones that are a little bit harder to kind of get on board. So I think explaining as you were talking and thinking about the parents, explaining to them that it's a discipline. Dance is a discipline, right? And so developing that discipline takes accountability and expectations, and that's happening naturally in the classroom. How a classroom functions, especially in a dance studio, is very specific and intentional, and getting them to understand that, especially at the beginning of the season, is going to help them kind of follow that through for the entire rest of the year. Same with the competition team, kind of setting it that way so you can have that second chance to really hone that in, I think is how I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You got your homework from Kelsey. Go for it. Baby steps, little changes. I'm going to give you another piece of homework. Take the steps initiative. Bree is popping that link up onto the screen right now. It is a free course module that talks about a number of things from professionals who develop these modules to educate you on racism, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance medicine and science, and a number of other things. It is totally free and still available to you. Kelsey, I know you are teaching now all over the place. And you are booking probably out to 2030 at this point. So how can people get in touch with you?
They can email me at kjndance@gmail.com, or they can find me on Instagram at kjndance, or on Facebook. So those are 3 easy ways to get a hold of me, and reach out. And I'm always there for questions. If you have comments, feedback, I think it's important that as educators, we're always learning, right, from experiences and interactions with each other. So I'm always open to hearing that. And if you have any questions, thoughts, feelings, I'm always here. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. It's just always so much fun to have you on. I feel like we're all just like this the whole time we're talking and taking notes. I hope everybody else out there is just walking away with a ton of great information because we are headed into the last half of the season, or our second half of the season, especially if you're a competition director. So this is great insight as it's things that you can implement now as you make that transition. So Kelsey, thank you very, very much for your insight and your time.
Thank you. So sorry. Thank you for having me.
It's fun. We're going to have you back, I'm sure, in 2024. We are already scheduling well into 2024. If there is something you want to hear about or you want us to discuss on Beyond the Steps, something you've been really wanting to dive into or learn more about, message us, shoot us a DM, message us info@apolloperformance.com. Or if you want to join us as one of our guest panelists, we're always looking for people to bring into the Beyond the Steps family. Just shoot us a message or a DM. Next week, December 8th, join us for a new conversation with Suzanne Purcell. She's the co-founder and CEO of Rise Media and also on the board for Confluence Ballet. And really, she's just focusing on bringing equity to the ballet world. We're excited to chat with her about, does the starving artist persona still exist? And what does it mean exactly and why? So join us for that conversation. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Join the Beyond the Steps community. We really want to get these episodes out. We have so much amazing content from seasons 1 through now season 4 we're in. It's really incredible to think we've been at it for this long. And there's just so much to share with the community that we all love so much. We want to leave it better than we found it. So share away. You can find all of our episodes, season 1 through 4, on YouTube and Facebook at Apollo Performance and at TP Dance Creations. Thank you so much for watching. You have your homework from Kelsey today. And until next time, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.
Bye, everybody.